Hi guys, welcome to session 70 of Java Full Stack Made Easy. In this session, we will talk about template driven forms in Angular. Angular basically has two type of forms, the template driven and the reactive forms. First, we will see what exactly Angular forms are, then we will see the type of Angular forms. And in this session, we are mainly going to talk about the Angular's template driven forms. So first of all, let's talk about what exactly are Angular forms. Okay, Angular forms is nothing but what? It's a way for Angular to read, validate, and use the input. Okay, so whenever you create an online application form, be it a login form or a registration form, how does the website read that data, right? And obviously whenever you are filling up a form, your data will be required, your data is validated, your data is read, and your data is being used. So Angular uh, forms does this. It's a way for Angular to do all these things. Now you might say, what is that, like why Angular uses Angular forms to read, validate, and use the input? So a simple reason for that is Angular provides you a powerful way of validating, retrieving, and using the input provided by the user. Fine. So the two type of Angular forms, one is template driven, another one is reactive. So to understand this in simple term, template driven forms are HTML type of forms. What I mean by HTML form is that everything is at the HTML side. Most logic is at the HTML side, and in reactive form, most logic is at the TypeScript side. So this is the easiest thing which I could tell you about the forms. So let us now talk about how are we going to deal with the concept of the template driven forms. Now, what is a template driven form? A template driven form, the form is created mainly at what? Mainly at the HTML side, and this is done using ngModel, right? So let's add that ngModel. So for ngModel, we have seen two-way data binding also. The concept of two-way data binding is completely different than the Angular forms. Reason for that is two-way data binding uh, deals with only what? Deals with only the property and data sync. Okay, whereas the forms are much more than just data syncing. It's about the status of the form, the state of the form, the data about the entire form. Okay, now uh, template driven forms are created mainly in HTML using ngModel, and Angular automatically builds the form model behind the scenes. Now how Angular is building the form model behind the scenes, and what happens if Angular builds a form model behind the scene when we are working with the Angular forms? Let's see that example and understand the power of Angular. So I'm creating a template driven form. So because it's a template driven form, most of the things will be written at the HTML side itself. So I will just add a form tag to my any of the input. Let's say I have some input like input type, maybe this is gonna be a text, and I'll say I'll write some name for this so that I can have an identity of this, and let's call it as something like maybe a username. Okay, so that's done. Now I save this, right? So I have not written any extra thing over here, so I'm simply writing a form, and then I have added a forms tag here. So let me go to a terminal and run this piece of code. Ng serve hyphen o. I think I have to just do a ng serve because already in my browser this previous application is running. So let it start. So once this application gets started, I want to actually show you what happens in Angular the moment we add up a forms tag to it. I'll go to an inspect, and in terms of element, I'll go to the inspect element part here. You can see that, and I want to inspect this element that I have created here. Now the moment I click on this element, you see that I have just added a form tag, right? In Angular I added just a forms tag, but what is this no validate class is equal to ng untouched, ng pristine, ng valid. So I did not add this. If you see the source of the application, I have just added a Angular form here, right? So the moment Angular sees that a form tag is added in Angular, so Angular adds its power to the form so that you can easily do what? You can easily read, validate, and use the input. Fine, that's what Angular forms are. It's a way for Angular to read, validate, and use the input. So the moment you add a forms tag, Angular automatically adds few of these built-in Angular classes to it, so that you can do magic on this. Now, magic with this, not on this. Okay, so now what is that magic which we are talking about in Angular? So very first thing is that whenever you put a forms tag, no doubt you're going to get this. But the thing is that if you add a ngModel or you add a ng form, at that time you can track the status of these things live. So let me add that. Now if I try and write something here, nothing happens, right? So I'm trying to do that. Um Now let me just tell you what exactly this few things here. Untouched in the sense, if any control you put on your Angular template, that means on the HTML page, if the field is not touched, it is going to add a ng untouched. If I click on this, it will be ng touched, and if nothing is returned, it is ng pristine. If I write something, it is gonna be ng dirty. Similarly, if I add validations onto this particular control, like maybe a required field validator or maybe an email field validator, any validator I add upon this, so this field will have either a ng valid or invalid depending upon the data that is passed with this. Fine. So although I'm touching this particular field and I'm making it dirty, but these classes are not changed, right? So now again the same thing, what I will do now is that I'll go to this form and I'll create a template variable here. Let's call it as f, which is a template variable, and this template variable will be targeting to an ng form, which is again a built-in object available for us when we are working with the Angular forms. Now again we can go for the ng submit. There will be a button called as ng submit. Upon submit of that particular button, I want to track this result. So as for now I'm just writing it, I'll not be using it. Acha, anyways, what we will do for now is we'll not add this ng submit. Later we can add the ng submit. So I have an input type is equal to text. The name of the field is username. Now I will add a ngModel. So you can see that while talking about the template driven form, so we use this ngModel to make our application read and validate the data. So now I have an ngModel. Let's also have a placeholder for this to tell our user what to do. Okay, enter name. Okay, this is optional. I'm just adding it because if ngModel is added to any of the input, at that time it requires you to add a placeholder, because Angular is intelligent enough. If you don't add a label or you don't add a placeholder, at that time it is going to give you the error saying that either a label has to be added or a placeholder has to be added for a user to understand what exactly the field is for. Fine. So I have written just this. Now I will save it. Okay, I'll go back to the same elements. Now you can see that this field is actually untouched. Now I click on this particular field and I try to do something with it. So now you can see that the field is actually touched and ng dirty is applied on it. So what I will do is I'll create one more field for it, so that I will move to next field and you see the details changed. Okay, so let's call it as password or something. Okay, let's save it. And now you see that I have enter name. This could be enter password later. So I'm clicking on this field which is the username, and I do something to it and I move away from it. Now you notice it here, it is valid, it is dirty, and it is touched. Similarly, if I go to this particular field, so there are multiple fields now. The other field is password. So now this particular password field, if you see, it is touched, it is valid, and it is pristine because I did not write anything here. If I write something here, it becomes dirty. So that is the power of Angular. Automatically it is tracing what the inputs, the data, and the state as well, right? So by using this, we can validate the inputs, we can read the input, and we can uh, use that input. Fine. So that's the actual power of Angular. Now what I will do is that since I already have this fields created, I will try to read the data about this. So now that I'm just checking about the status about the fields like ng, dirty, pristine, and all that. So now I want to read the data about this. So let's have a name, username and password, and let's allow the user to enter the password. Okay, and now I will create the submit button. First I will just share this with you so that you just test it in your machine as well. So this is gonna be our session 70, right? So day 70, demo 1 about the template driven form. So this is just my simple template driven form, and I'll add a note here. Note, add uh, forms module in app dot module dot TypeScript. Fine. So that would be required. And once this is done, what you need to do is you need to for the result, okay, for result, inspect the elements. So what you have to do is you have to right click and then inspect the elements in your code. Okay, so when you inspect the elements, then you will be able to see this classes. Okay, for results, inspect the elements and see classes like ng, touched, ng, dirty, ng, valid. So these are the classes that you are gonna just check, test it when you add a Angular form. Okay, so let me just commit this and let's go back to the code part. And here I was telling you that I will be adding a submit button to this to read the form data. So I'll have a ng submit, and upon submit of this form, what I will do is I will have a function. Let's call this as save or something, and this template variable is something which I am passing so that it contains all the data about the form. So I'm passing that, and in my TypeScript I want to know what are the details that are added there. Okay, so I need a save method to be created here. So I'll create that, and in the save method I have a form, let's say of type, it can be ng form or it can be of type any. Now what I will do is I'll simply do a console log to read out the data that I'm getting from the form. So I'm getting what? I'm getting the form. Let's just print the form first, or we can also do a form dot value, whether it is valid or not, whatever things we want to read from there, we can read it by using this. So let's just read the values and see what happens. Then I'll go to the console. Okay, and I should also have a button. Upon click of that button, the form has to be submitted. So input type, let's create a button or maybe a type submit. Let's save it. So for submit, we don't need to give the caption, automatically it will have a caption as submit. So now I will write something, maybe enter name, test, password is pass. So I click on this submit button. So the moment I click on this submit button, you can notice that I'm able to get the data by just using what form dot value. So the entire form data can be read just by using a simple property called as form dot value. So this is the magic of Angular forms. ngModel connects input with Angular. The form template variable that I have created here, that is a hash f is equal to ng form, gives us the access to form objects, and the form automatically tracks the status, like whether the form is valid, dirty, etc., and also we can get the value about the form. So that way we can make use of Angular's template driven forms. So let me put this as well into the repository. Again, this is a template driven form where we are reading the form values. So template driven forms can be used for simple forms like Google Forms and all. So if there is a more complex form, at that time we can go for what? We can go for a reactive form. That's the recommendation. Now let's try and put some validations into our template driven form. Once again, here I have a form created, then I have this input type username. Let's say that this will be required. So instead of username, what I will do is I'll call it as an email, and I put two validations on this. So let's say input type is equal to email, and the name, let's call it as email itself or something. Okay, and the ngModel will be applied to this placeholder. Let's have a placeholder, maybe an enter email. Now I'm gonna add the validators to it. So what is going to be the validator now? So I will add a validator as a required field validator. Okay, so validator will be required, and also we can apply the email field validator to it, right? So two validators I'm applying on this. One is the required field validator. That means the uh, field has to be provided, and the field is an email field. Okay, so we can also use a template variable to track only the status of this particular field. So like we have taken it here, like hash f is equal to ng form, we can do what this ng model that we are applying. We can have a template variable where we are tracking that status. So what we can do is we can create any, maybe let's say element is equal to ng model. So that way we can just track the status of this particular field. Okay, so now since it is all HTML, I will check if the field is invalid. Then I'm gonna say that an email provided by the user is invalid. So let us add that. Okay, so let's add a division. What I mean by that is, if a user comes down here and tries to enter an email, if a wrong email is entered after he touches this and goes to this particular field, if that email is invalid, I want to just tell the user that the email provided by you is invalid. That's something that we generally see on the web pages. Okay, so for that, what I will do is I'll create a division for giving the error message to the user. So I'll call it as ng if, and this has to be displayed only if there are errors. Okay, so ng if what, this e what we have created, this element. So obviously in the previous example you might have seen that the moment I was clicking on the element, it was showing me that it is touched, and uh, when I return something, that means I made it dirty. So dirty, pristine, valid, and all that we have seen in the previous example. So what I'm checking here is that check if e dot invalid, if it is invalid or not. So and also check whether this e is touched or not. Okay, so if e is touched and is invalid, at that time print this particular message. And what message I want to print it as invalid email. Okay, so you can bring in your ng styles and all, make it red, and it would look much more prettier. Now I come down here, so it is asking me to enter an email. So what I will do is I'll click on this. It is touched, right? Now it is required field validator, so a data has to be given. Second is that email type of data has to be given. So I'm touching it, I just move away. I did not provide any required field validator. I did not even provide an email to it, right? So I touch it now. I provided the details, but the email is invalid. Still it says it is an invalid email. Why is that? Because it's not a valid email there, right? So what I'm gonna do now is that I will check that whether a required field validator is failed, or valid email data is failed. Okay, because there can be a situation where a user enters something but it is invalid email. This only by this we can do it, or we can, if we wish to trace the errors, we can even trace the errors. Let us understand how am I going to trace the errors for this now. Now that you have understood this, so I'll just collapse this. That looks good now. Okay, now what I want to test is that I want to test what type of error is generated, whether there is the error related to required field validator or the error is related to the email field validator, because I have added two validators here. One is the required, one is the email validator. Two validators I have applied on this. So let us test that. Now what I'm going to do for that, once again I'll take this div and ng if and everything. So what I'm going to check is if e dot touched, if it is touched, first thing is I'll check if it is touched, and also what I'm gonna check is that if the error is because of the required field validator. So how can we trace that? We can simply say e dot errors, which is again a built-in object, e dot errors, and within that what am I checking? If the e dot errors is about the required field. So if it is because of the required field, then give me a different message. If it is about the email, give me a different message. So yeah, and also at that time it has to be touched. So in this case I'll say uh, email required or something. Okay, email is required. So if we get this error, that means the user has touched it but user has not entered any email on it. And similarly what I will have is I will have another message here in errors. If it is because of the email instead of required, if it is because of this email, then I will say enter email he has enter a enter valid email. So this is what I will tell my user to. So in this case we are studying about the concept of errors, the error generation, so that on a form we can show our user what went wrong. So now a user is touching this, user moves away from this. So once the user moves away from this, you can notice that it says email is required. Okay, why is this invalid email? Because email is required, a user did not enter the email. Now a user is entering some data, that means it is touched, and it's not empty, right? The required field validator will be gone. Now after that when I move away, it says it's an invalid email. Why is that? Enter a valid email. So the entered data is not matching the valid email, right? So if I enter a valid email, like a valid email requires a symbol and @gmail.com or any email. So now you can see that the errors are gone. So there is no error related to required field validator. There's no error related to the email field validator as well. So that way we can put up the validators as well in template driven forms, and you can notice that every single thing here about the validations, about the creation of errors, using the errors or creating template variables, everything I have done at the HTML side itself. So most of my logic resides at the HTML side. That's why we are calling it as a template driven form. Okay, so let's call it as demo 3 validators and errors. Okay, let's now read about the properties like pristine, dirty, touched, untouched, valid, invalid, which I have shown you in the first example. What I will do is that if you want to see it here itself, we can also do that. Let me create a field accordingly and show you the details here itself. So what I have is I have two fields created for now, for an email and for also a password, right? So let's keep it pretty simple and straightforward. So for an email, I have this, right? So required an email field validator. So what I will test is that I'll simply test these things over there. So let me clean up this placeholder for this, and here I'm gonna create some paragraphs, and I'll check for email. I have given this E. So I'll check whether E is touched or not, and all that can directly be done here if you don't want to perform a inspect element. It is like let's check whether it is pristine or not. Okay. Now, how do I check whether it is pristine or not? So I can simply say e dot pristine. So that tells me whether the element is pristine or not. Similarly, I can go for touched, untouched, valid, invalid, dirty. So if it is not pristine, it is dirty. If it is not touched, it is touched. Okay. So let's go for dirty and what? Touched, untouched, valid, invalid. I can also go for value as well. So let's check these first. Dirty, that tells us whether it is true or not. So touched, untouched, valid, invalid. We can check for the values, we can check for the errors, anything that you like. Let's go for a value as well. Okay, let me just save it, and there we go. So you can see that the uh, control that I have, the form control, the email control, is pristine, and it's not dirty, it's not touched, and it is untouched. You can see that untouched is true. The validity is false because I have added a required field validator and an email field validator on this. Now let us touch it. Okay, so the moment I touch it, so the touched property should become true. If I move away from something, see, if I move away, then the touched property comes into picture. Touched is true, and now I have made it dirty, so dirty is true. Pristine becomes false, so it can either be pristine or it can be dirty. Then the validity of this is false because I have not entered a valid email. So if I enter a valid email, then the validity becomes true and the value is a@gmail.com. So that way we can read the details about this. And what I will do is one more thing. I'll simply go here and then put up just an e there. I save it, and it is actually going to give me an object there, right? So when it gives me an object, it means it contains a lot of things into it, not just a simple e. So what we can do is we can take that e once the form is submitted, and you can read about the data in there. Okay, so upon submit, we can also pass in this. I'm calling a save method. So previously I was passing an f. Let's pass an e and the console.log form.value. Okay, that's fine. So let's just pass the form, and let's enter something. Let's hit submit. Yeah, sorry. Okay, okay. So this is about the form. Let it be there, and upon submit, we will call some function here. Let's not do a ng submit. When this is clicked, we'll call a save method and we will pass in e there. Fine, so that the values are now taken. I'll add something, I'll submit it. It's still invalid. Form will not be submitted until and unless it is invalid. So I submit it. Now you can see that this is what it gives us. There are so many properties which we can read from this. So you can see it. You can see that it is a model email, and what are the validators that are applied on it, whether it is in invalid errors, and all these details can be traced. Okay, so that way you can get to know what all properties our fields can contain. So you can see that it contains a lot of things. Okay, so I'll just go back to what it was before. This way you can check it. Even for the form also you can check it. Even the form will be having all that detail. In the previous example I was just testing the form dot value. So what you can simply do is you can just check what all details a form can give us. So upon click of submit, yeah, sorry, so let's just reload it. First of all, the form will not be submitted in this case unless I give a valid email. So it requires an @ symbol and it requires a dot symbol. So now the form is submitted. You see this, these are the properties about the form. So that's how you can trace all the properties about the form, and that's how you can deal with the validations and the providing the errors and everything with the form. So I'll just simply add up this to the repo. This is demo for properties. So in the next session, we will talk about the reactive forms, and also we can bring in our own form validators. Hope you're enjoying in the series. If you like in the series, comment on my videos and share it with your friends. See you in the next video.